The workshop meeting of the Board of Trustees of the McAllen Independent School District will be held Monday, March 26, 2018, beginning at 3:30 p.m. in the Blue Bonnet Room Staff Development Center at Lamar Academy. At this meeting, there may be discussion by the board on the items and subjects listed as follows. Item 1, call the meeting to order. Item 2, discussion of the 2018-2019 budget. Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Lorena Garcia. It's time. We want to thank everybody. Let's go ahead and get started.
Can you say the time?
And it is 3:32.
Okay, thank you.
Purple.
It's on there, you so sit. You know.
It's on that.
Thank you, and I'm going to go ahead and get started with our presentation on the second budget workshop for the 18-19 school district budget. It's a three-part presentation. The first part, I'm going to briefly explain the additional funding that the district was able to receive this year and the prior year, and as well as 2012, how that mechanism works, and just to illustrate how moving forward the district can also leverage no tax increase tax swap that would allow us to gain additional state aid. After that, Dr. Rivera does have a presentation, a follow-up presentation on the tuition-based pre-K program. And then followed by Mr. Miller will go over the budget assumptions for HR staffing budget. So just to emphasize again to everybody that our budget is in line with our strategic plan, strategy 7, our financial priorities, and in that we will conduct a budget development, implementation, monitoring process that reflects sound business and fiscal practices while supporting the district goals. And of course, this is also aligned with our vision and mission. And then we also focus on that in our goal 4 financial priorities. This chart provides a history of McAllen ISD's tax rate. For the last 9 years, the district has had the same or lower tax rate, so our taxpayers have not seen an increase in the past 9 years, and that's thanks to the board setting a tax rate, a reasonable tax rate. As you can see in this chart, from 2010 to 2018, the tax rate was $1.16.5, and then in 2016 it went down a penny to $1.15.5, and it continues that way. For next year, we're proposing maintaining the same tax rate to our taxpayers, keeping in mind that every penny generates approximately $680,000 in tax effort. So this is the total tax rate that the taxpayer pays. As I mentioned, yes, sir.
Go back to it. Can you explain to us? I think I know the answer, but just the 116.5 to 115.5. What generated that drop?
What generated that drop was that a decrease in our debt service needs, and the district calculated that tax rate and realized that we could reduce our debt service tax rate by a penny and still be able to make our bond payment.
Okay.
As I mentioned before, in 16-17 and 17-18 school year budgets.
I'm sorry, Ms. Garcia.
Yes, sir.
Going back to that same question.
Sure.
How much are we then still putting into the debt service going down by that 1 penny? How much did that result in? Is that $680,168?
That's in maintenance and operations tax collections.
Okay, so on the debt service side, by taking that 1 penny away, I'm going to $1.15.5. How much are we still putting in, and how much is that still generating for us?
Well, it's approximately a little bit over like about 7.5, 7.8 million in tax effort, with the 15.5 cents on the INS side. We do have a healthy fund balance as well in our debt service. This year we're planning on ending close to like $2.5 million. It's a little bit more than what is recommended, so it's quite healthy at this point.
Now, right now, we're paying into the debt service, what, 10.7 million? How much are we paying per year?
We're paying, 9 million.
9 million.
9 million per year. And
Okay.
next year, the debt service payment will go down to 8 million. And then the subsequent year, it will go down to 7.
7. And then from that point till the end of the note, it's
Through
7.
2030, the payment will remain the same.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
The reason is I was given different figures, but you've clarified, thank you.
Okay. And as a result of the declared disaster, the district was able to leverage an additional 7 million in state aid, state revenue, by the Texas Education Agency Foundation School Program by just swapping the two tax rates and, you know, not exceeding the total tax rate of $1.15.5. This was done due to the one-time weather-related emergency declaration.
Wasn't it only one time?
It was, it's allowed one time per event, per year, and we had 2 separate, years where we had events, and then one also in 2012.
So we've had 3 events, one for each year in the last.
Yes,
3
3
years.
opportunities, and to do that, and all 3 times, the district did not increase the total tax rate to the taxpayers, but was able to get additional state revenue. In the past 2 years, it's been roughly 7 million in additional state aid. And that money was used for one-time expenditures, because since it's a one-time shot, it's not something that we could continuously budget unless the community were to approve a permanent, tax swap.
Now, when we moved it to the M&O side, it now subjects that to any change in the property tax, wouldn't it?
As far as, you mean, property values or?
Now, well, that leads to the next question, but
Mhm.
when the sink fund or the debt service,
Mhm.
it's a set rate. And it's not subject to any changes in the property value, provided it stays on the sink side. But when you move it to the M&O side, now it's $1.15.5 on the M&O side.
Mhm.
Does the taxpayer, if there's a praise increase, does that increase it by the full $1.15.5 versus $1.04? For that time period that we moved it over? If there's an increase in the appraisal?
If there's an increase in a taxpayer's property, then their tax bill would have increased just by the nature that their property was appraised at a higher rate. However, the rate that's multiplied to calculate their taxes is the $1.15.5, and it has been so, since 2016. In 2017 and 18, embedded into that tax rate, we had 2 components. We had the maintenance and operation side at $1.04 in 2016, and 15.5 cents on the INS side. So whether the property increases occurred or not occurred to the taxpayer, ultimately their tax bill wouldn't have made any difference to the
So in other words, they're
taxpayer.
taxed at the $1.15.5 no
They're
matter what.
told, no matter what.
So the property goes up, and whether we're paying the INS side or the debt relief, or you're paying M&O, and you move this around, it's still gonna be taxed
That's
at the
correct.
$1.15
The
per
total
$100
bill-
valuation.
The total bill by the taxpayer, it's their appraised value times the total tax rate. So they do not see a difference one way or the other in their tax bill, and that's the beauty of it, that we do not impact the local tax base, however, we're generating additional state revenue.
Right, because the reason I'm asking is there's been conversation, knowing about what we're likely to do.
Mhm.
And when we did the tax swap, there was a misunderstanding of what that meant, and they felt that generated more income for the district, rather than the reality, it's just your appraised value would have been the same either way, no matter which side of the fence we had it on.
Yes, we did have,
That we need to make clear as we go forward.
we do experience about a 3.5% to 4% increase in property values in our community year to year. As a matter of fact, we just had a presentation by our tax assessor, Mr. Rolando Garza, and he presented the entire Hidalgo County, and on average, the entire county had increased about 4%. But that, whatever that value gets calculated by the county, the district has no control over that, and that value gets multiplied by the total tax rate. Whether we had done the swap or not, at the end of the day, the tax bill for our taxpayers would have remained the same. However, if we had not done the swap, the district would not have received those additional 7 million, and that money, TEA,
State funding.
in state funding, TEA would have sent that money somewhere else in the state of Texas. It would not have come to our students and our community.
Good. That's the story.
So the school district, we do have the lowest school district, tax rate in Hidalgo County at $1.15.5 per valuation, for $100 of property valuation. And of course, we have not had a tax increase, for the last 9 years and counting. And we're proposing to not have a tax rate increase in, 18-19.
And then tax increases, but not as a result.
Not a
of
tax
us.
rate,
Yeah.
not the total tax rate, that's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Garcia,
Yes, sir.
you talk about how we have the lowest tax rate among surrounding districts.
Total tax
Right.
rate.
It's also fair to say that we have it lower than districts that surround us that are actually getting more money from the state than we are.
Yes, sir, from the state, yes.
Most of them do.
Most of them get more funding, from the state. And that also has to do with their, tax roll, their appraisal.
The point I'm trying to make is that previous boards, as long as this board has been very frugal with the community in terms of making sure that, it doesn't impact them, but surrounding districts, not only are they taxing higher, but they're also receiving more funding from the state.
Yes, and part of it, the reason they're taxing higher is because their debt obligations are higher than ours. That's another reason as well. So, and later on tonight, we will have a presentation by, Dusty Traylor, and he's going to talk about the district's credit rating, and he will also touch on our tax rate and how we compare to other districts. So he'll go into greater detail on that subject.
Is the plan, Ms. Garcia, at this conversation tonight to talk about what likely could happen if the district becomes a Chapter 41? If we don't do certain things over the next year with the TRE and others, that we could become a Chapter 41, which means monies we have to give to the state that we don't.
That's part of the research that we're doing. If we were to do, we're quite far off from being a Chapter 41 school district, but that is something that we're analyzing. Rough estimates are if we were to actually continue to see tax increases and even growth in enrollment, because it's based on wealth per student, property wealth per student, we would not reach that until maybe 7 to 10 years. That's if with the tax swap, if we were to do the tax swap. However, there's measures that we can take to prevent that. Every year we could monitor that, make sure we're not at that level. At any point in time, the school district could lower tax rate, and then go back to what was previously approved in subsequent years, if the financial factors change in that calculation. So that is one of the things that we, like I said, we are definitely analyzing, and will be presented to the board later on in a subsequent meeting as far as what the long-term ramifications would be if we were to have a permanent tax swap.
Because that is a concern. Other districts, before you knew it, those 10 years happened, and now they're giving money back to the state, and they can't turn the corner. And so the point I'm making is, I heard a much closer time frame. It's great, but if we don't start monitoring before we know it, with some of the things that sometimes happens to us when we kind of move along at a much slower pace, is that you're there before you know it, and now what? Now you're giving money away.
Well, just to to review how the tier two funding, which is where we see the increase in regards to this, no tax increase tax swap that we did this year and the prior year and in 2012, how the mechanics of that work, just to explain to the community how that works. I've prepared the next couple of slides. Of course, as we mentioned, there's two tax rates in the total tax rate. There's a maintenance and operation tax rate, which would fund your day-to-day operations. That's how we make payroll, that's how we pay the light, that's how we buy insurance, how we buy instructional materials and pay for, curriculum programs and so forth. The interest and sinking tax rate is our, funds our debt repayment, our bond payment. So you have the two tax rates. Together, they make up the total tax rate. And the anatomy of that, on the maintenance and operation side, the state allows a maximum, tax rate of $1.17. The district is not at the maximum. Next year, without a permanent approval of a tax swap by the community, we would be at $1.04 on the maintenance and operation side, very far from the $1.17. On the INS side, the maximum that you can tax out is 50 cents, and we're at 11.5 cents. So well below the state statutory maximums. So on the bottom, you see, the first dollar of the $1.17 state allowed maximum. And then the second tier where you see the first 4 pennies, a school district cannot exceed $1.04 without an election. So they cannot tax above that without asking for board approval. Those 4 pennies, in addition with the next 2 pennies of tax effort, are considered the golden pennies, and those are paid at the Austin yield. Whatever whatever the Austin school district is getting from the state, they calculate that and make sure there's a guaranteed yield that ensures that every penny of tax effort will generate that specified amount. And that has been increasing. Last year it was at 99, and then this coming year it will be increased as well. So that's good for school districts that are taxing at $1.04 to $1.06. However, McAllen ISD will be at $1.04 without permanent approval. So we will be 2 pennies shy of those golden pennies. And then beyond that are your copper pennies, what they call the copper pennies, and they also have a guaranteed yield. So if we're taxing at $1.04, the school district will be missing out on the 2 golden pennies, and then a total of 12 pennies, 13 pennies of the copper pennies. So that's additional state funding that the district would not receive through the foundational school program, because we're not taxing at the maximum. So this is where our M&O tax rate would currently be at. And the guaranteed yield for those are, like I said, the golden pennies are increasing from $99 to $1.0628, and then the copper pennies are yielding $31.95, whereas the INS pennies are yielding $35 per ADA. So when you do those calculations, I'm going to illustrate through the state formula funding system how those calculations work, how having those pennies on the M&O side gives you a greater return than having them on the INS side, and hence that's why we had the net increase in state aid. So the total tax rate, $1.15.5, that remains the same, and then it's broken down into the $1.04 for M&O and 15.5 cents on the debt side. So by keeping the $1.15.5 as a total tax rate, not an increase to the taxpayers, but yet maintaining your M&O tax rate at $1.04, and then 11.5 cents on the INS side, you plug that into the state formula. But, once you run it, it, I can't really see that, but, as you can see, there's a net, tier 2 allotment of $10.4 million, and the bottom part is your copper pennies. Level 1 is your golden pennies. So we're really only getting the first 4 cents are yielding us 10.4 in tier 2 funding. You know, remember I said that we were missing the 2 on the, and then all of the copper pennies, so that's why the bottom is 0. We're not seeing that state aid, okay? What happens if we move the 11.5 cents to the $1.04 side and drop the INS to 0, leaving the total tax rate still at $1.15.5? So you see how the taxpayer, what the taxpayer pays, the $1.15.5, that has not changed. We've just moved the amount from one side to the M&O side and then dropped the INS side. So what does that do to the formulas? You run it through a form. Now you're taking advantage on your level 1, 100% of the golden pennies. So that 10 million is now 15.8 million. And then on your level 2, your copper pennies, you're getting an additional, let's see, 2.7. So then that totals out to a tier 2 allotment of 18.3 versus 10.4 by doing that simple swap. So that's how the mechanics of that works, and what that means is $7.8 million in additional state revenue. Now, what we would do is,
Mayor,
yes,
and that $7.5 million of additional state aid, if we don't claim it, it's going to another school district.
that's correct. The state, it's money that they don't have to send McAllen ISD,
But
that they would possibly use for other areas of the state, or eventually it would go back to their fund balance. But, more than likely somebody else would,
Somebody's gonna claim it.
it would be spent. So,
And those are projections by doing that for 2018, 2019, correct?
yes, for 18-19. However, in order to do that, since we have not had a declared disaster that would allow us to do that, at a board level, we would have to pose that to the community, and the community would have to approve for us to do a permanent tax swap.
It's April, May, that's usually when they happen, so you never know. But you're right, I mean, the point being is that only gets us another year.
Well, it's
That's
the
it.
year before,
Yeah.
actually.
So it's last year.
Yes, it was last summer.
And we
It would
missed
have had
it.
to have been last summer.
Wasn't there also a legislative committee that was charged with revamping or reforming school finance?
Yes, there is.
And they've come out with some preliminary findings
Mhm.
that will change the funding formula. Not as expected they would, or as enough relief that they would.
Mhm.
If they change that funding formula without the tax swap, we could actually lose more money than we're getting now.
It's possible. A lot of the School Finance Commission is, as part of House Bill 21, the state did establish the commission to study the funding formulas and issues. And right now they're going through hearings. A lot of the conversation is, Representative Bernal was, saying that there's money within the school district. So it doesn't look very promising for traditional public schools. There's a lot of support for charter schools and private schools and vouchers and those conversations. Early on in their testimony, they heard a lot about that as well. But the outcome is to revamp the school funding formulas.
And if we are successful with the tax swap, even the $7.5 million could be reduced based on a new funding formula.
Based on the new funding formula, another thing is these are based on preliminary
Right.
estimates of enrollment and property values. So, that could also change their estimates at this point.
So that's best case scenario, present day factor.
Present day factors, that is our current projection. Mhm.
I think that's a point we have to, as we continue to move forward. If we don't get, I mean, they're not gonna make a decision, the commission may get a recommendation, but now it has to be legislated.
Yes,
So we're not gonna have that before this decision.
no.
So Mr. Vela brings up a point that we're gonna have to bring clarity to
Mhm.
as we go forward. Now, the arrows you have up there, those are just to point us in a direction. It doesn't mean that they're increasing, those blue
That,
arrows.
yes, that's just to show you the area to focus on. The, you know, the main thing to get from that is, without the tax swap, we would see 10.4 million in tier 2 allotment, and with it, it would,
18.
it'd be, that number increases,
Plus
cause now
7.
we're taking advantage of more, all of the golden pennies and then more of the copper pennies. And tier 2 funding is called enrichment funding, you know, and what that means is, you know, the district right now is getting a little bit more than half of what the state maximum allows for school districts. So that's enrichment funding that
We're not leveraging.
we're not leveraging because of our tax rate. However, you know, in order to do that, we would have to increase the tax rate, which is not something that we're prepared to do because we don't wanna impact the local community. But by doing a tax swap and then dropping the INS rate to 0, then we are able to leverage that without affecting our local tax base. So that's how the mechanics of it work, and I just wanted to share with you and this is from the actual state school finance template.
I'm sorry, but by doing that tax swap would be a penny and a half short of what's actually allowed, right?
The maximum, yes, that is true. As I mentioned in the earlier slide, the state maximum is $1.17.5. So we wouldn't take 100% of the state maximum. We wouldn't ask the public to approve the maximum. We would still be below the maximum. And
The key is what you're saying is, that when we did the swaps, you're gonna experience the same by us leveraging it all in from the outside, and your tax rate still remains the same.
yes,
That's what you're consistently saying.
We
You're
would-
not increasing the tax.
we're not increasing.
rate.
We would simply request that we continue doing what we've been doing for the past 2 years. And we would still be able to make our bond payment because with we would be able to you know, to make the bond payment with surplus M&O funding.
Now, is it the administration's thought that we would stay at that lower, when it moves down to 7 million in roughly 2020, right?
Mhm.
Plus or minus. You'd stay at that new rate, you wouldn't leave it at the current rate?
Eventually, and we're trying to calculate when that time frame would be. Let's say we would not do a tax swap, and we would remain at $1.11.5. At some point in time, it's very likely we will have to drop our INS rate. I mean, it could be another penny, but then after that, it would just remain the same through 2030. I'm trying to work with Ms. Richards so that we can identify what year that would occur. So those are some of the meetings that we were having last week with Mr. O'Hanlon and Mo Casey to come up with those projections, and also on the Chapter 41 projections to have that information.
Pardon me. Without debt, you can't charge the extra INS.
That's correct.
And if you don't charge it, you don't have enough money unless you can't use that money because you're not collecting it anymore.
Mhm.
So it goes away because we don't have any debt.
You can only use it to make your debt
Right.
payment.
So if we pass the tax swap and we still collect it at that rate, you go from an accrual basis to a cash basis in accounting, and you can pay for things as you go.
Mhm. Yes, on our, like, for example, like we did with our one-time projects, it would be, you know, what this does is the district would see these additional state money, you know, right now the estimate is 7.8, you know, we do, like, based on enrollment, property values, all of that, that number's gonna fluctuate from year to year. But it's roughly around 7 million or so. So that, as if it's a pay-as-you-go system where we're able to get that additional revenue for projects, future projects, versus going out and incurring additional debt.
Right.
And this way, it's money that's coming from the state. We're not committing the taxpayers to any additional taxes. We're simply asking
Tax
that,
rate.
that,
You gotta-
tax rate.
yeah.
We're simply asking that we freeze the total tax rate at this point in time. And that we be able to qualify for that additional tier 2 funding so that we can do, some of the projects that are very, very needed at the district without incurring that additional debt.
And even at that point, if you have that cash flow, you can go to more traditional borrowing methods without having to go to the city for an election for a particular bond issue.
Yes, we could also, in the future, if we analyzed and felt that we had sufficient funding to make a maintenance tax note payment with this funding, if it was secure, we could borrow money
Traditional money.
and to do, projects beyond that amount.
Okay, thank you.
The reason I keep going back to that 1 penny, is that if we stay on course, don't do the TRE or anything, we're gonna bring it down a penny going
Eventually,
forward on the
yes.
INS,
Very
right?
soon. Mhm.
And some folks may perceive that that would have been a tax rate drop. So by going the full amount, not adjusting for that difference that's gonna happen down the road when the INS side drops, we're in essence keeping that penny
Yes.
instead of reducing this effort by
Yes.
that penny.
As our bond payment decreases, then there's less M&O funds that we have to transfer to make that debt payment.
Right.
So yes, the difference between that, then that would also, that could be used to make a maintenance tax note payment, that difference.
And I'm in agreement with him, but again, some folks are gonna see that, is that you're saying you're making no change, and at the current time, you're not. But the reality is, in the very near future, you would have made a change downward as far as my tax rate by 1 more penny.
And we're not, we're being very transparent about that. As a matter of fact, the conversations that I've had, with, teacher, organization leaders who have discussions with our employees, they've asked me, what are the cons? And that is one of the things that I've mentioned to them. So we're being very open and transparent. We're asking, that the board consider this, and hopefully eventually our taxpayers, are able to consider it. I think as my role, with the district, I think I would be doing a great disservice to this community if I did not point out this opportunity to gain an additional $7.8 million in state funding for our children. They're potentially taxpayers, if we don't go that route, could see maybe a penny drop. I could get you that figure exactly, and I can tell you when. However, if our community would be open to that, we would be able to reinvest that state funding, for the benefit of our students and our community, our teachers, our staff.
I have no issue with what we're doing. I'm just pointing out that we gotta be cognizant of the fact that the perception's gonna be, when we make this statement, is that the tax rate stayed the same. And it's true for current, but if you look forward, just like we showed the earlier charts, we already did it by 1 penny drop.
Yes.
Everybody being conscious of every tax amount, and entities that continue to look at taxing, this community. What you don't want to get caught in, that's the point I'm trying to raise. While you say you're transparent, if you're not upfront with that point, that's a hook. And the more hooks you have, you're looking at a very narrow pros and cons. So I'm not buying and selling. when it comes to the point I'm making. I'm just making, that's an observation I think folks are gonna have.
If I may, that's one of the conversations we have had, is we do want to be very transparent and let the community know that that's obviously something that could happen. However, we would ask that the community come together if we went down this road and make a commitment to the children to freeze the tax rate at the $15.50. And it's not any new money for us, it's the way we've been operating for the last 2 years. What we don't wanna do is go backwards and lose that $7+ million, because then that puts us in a very compromising position. So we feel that with our replacement schedules and with the plan that we have, looking out 5-10 years, that we could utilize this money very responsibly, and with the board that we have and the guidance that we have, could really do some great things with that money over time.
Well, the reality is you have an example already. I mean, we have done swaps, and we have been very focused and purposeful on those funds to provide instruction for this community, whether it's including environment, security, and safety. So I think that's the story going into it.
And the board has been very considerate in all 3 times, in consideration of taxpayers, because by law, the board could have raised the tax rate all the way up to $1.17.50, and in all 3 instances, the board chose to honor a no tax rate increase to the community. So track record has shown that faithfulness to the taxpayers as well, that consideration. So, that was my final slide, and I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Sylvia Ibarra.
Just a comment before you go, when we have a further discussion on the tax ramification, we're gonna have a detailed, list of activities, or, that's not the right word, a detailed list of how we're gonna spend that money if it passes, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're gonna have a list very soon, and we're in the process of sharing some of that with you later on tonight, that lays
Right.
out, for example, McAllen High School, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and what would come from fund balance and what would come from a potential
Perfect.
tax roll. So
Just,
we'll tell the whole
I knew you
story.
were working, I just wanted to make sure.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. As you know, at the last board workshop, we discussed offering a tuition-based pre-K program, and this is in an effort, of course, to increase our enrollment in McAllen ISD. Moving forward, we'd like to offer a pilot program. Last time I shared with you the campuses that had available classroom. We have approximately 20 classrooms throughout the district. However, we would like to first pilot it in 2018, 2019 at the following campuses. The 2 campuses that we're proposing is Castañeda Elementary. They have 4 available classrooms. However, we would like to open up 3 classrooms. This would be up to 75 students, and it would be an English program. At Sanchez Elementary, that would be the 2nd campus, and we would like to offer a tuition-based pre-K program. We do have 2 available classrooms, and that would be for up to 50 students, and of course, this would be a dual language program. In addition, because we have heard from our employees, we would like to open it up to all our district employees at all elementary campuses. However, students will be assigned to the existing classrooms, and this will be contingent upon space availability. So we're targeting about 100 to 150 students for year 1. And once we see the outcome, we see if there's a need, a demand for this program, we can adjust accordingly for the following year.
I have a question before we go to the next slide. I know that we were, had a workshop, and we were talking about proposed school sites. One of the school sites was Rayburn, in which we felt it was pretty centrally located. Why has that campus been scratched off?
The reason is because the Rayburn is not a STEAM campus, I'm sorry, a dual language campus, and we would like to offer 1 dual language program and 1 STEAM campus. And that's the reason, that's really the only
I
reason.
just think that in terms of demographics, when we talk about people having to pay for tuition, it's gotta be somewhere where it's centrally located. I think, I mean, I don't know, I think that these schools might be a little bit far-fetched from where people would be willing to take their kids, as opposed to, a lot of times, there are 2 types of parents, and not that one's the wrong way or another, but a lot of times when we choose, and I'm just based on experience too, I mean, I would drive out of my way to drop off my kid, but a lot of these parents don't have that luxury, and it's gotta be somewhere where it's convenient. And I think that where we have the most populated areas, the Gonzalez area, if we could draw some of those parents that would be willing to pay tuition to take their kids to a somewhere where it's in close proximity, we might have the chance of them staying there and not wanting to move them to another campus because they're comfortable there, as opposed to them having to drive a lot further away from where their home campus would be. I mean, it's just my suggestion.
I know that in speaking to the principal from Castañeda, she was receiving phone calls already. There was an article on the paper, and of course the community saw the workshop online, and so she was already receiving phone calls wanting to know how soon can we enroll students and so forth. So there is interest at Castañeda because it was specifically mentioned. I haven't heard from everybody. We can most certainly revisit that. That's
Yeah,
not a
and these are
problem.
just proposed sites. We can come back, brainstorm, and come up with some different options, different combinations.
However, the Spanish speaking, and I respect his trustee Suarez's view. I think the Spanish language component is a big part. I did get some feedback from some parents that justifies the additional, what we're charging. So I can see what he's saying too, but I think the flip side is the pilot, it's important to include a campus that has that Spanish component.
One thing to keep in mind is Bettis also has a two-way dual language program.
And IB, and
And
it's a new
IB,
school, and
right.
Sanchez is a new school too.
So those are, like I said, this is just something that we wanted to start as a proposition, but we can definitely come back with different combinations. I know that we're hearing a lot of positive feedback on Fossum being a pathway for the two-way dual language at this point. So we're excited about that. So we definitely want to create that pipeline. So we want to fight that right.
I think to his point though, if we do get additional, pretty good interest, maybe we go to a third site, and Rayburn would be a perfect site for it.
Does
Because then you can have all three.
Bettis have availability also?
Yes.
It does.
Oh, Bettis does?
Well, I spoke to, we have space for one classroom
Oh,
at Bettis.
but at Rayburn you have like
We have five
classrooms.
classrooms.
So that might be.
Now,
But if you, I mean, to me, we're targeting a certain group of people they're not selecting MISD, so we're marketing to these people, so we need to show them the best, like our newest schools, our best science labs, our dual language, our IB, our STEAM. I mean, to me, you need to be very focused on what's the best that we have to offer, so we can snag them in, hook them, and they stay with us until they graduate.
When you first brought this to our attention, there's a cost associated with this, because we're not gonna get any state funding at all.
Correct. That is correct.
So, we were familiar with it being 3 schools. Now you're talking about all elementary campuses with employees who have students to stay there. Have we any idea, you said roughly 100 additional or 100 total?
100 to 150 total for year one. So if we were to have 5 full classrooms at Castañeda and Sanchez, that would be 125, and approximately 25 from district employees. And again, it could be more, but again, this is only the parents, the teachers, our employees who have children at their campus. Usually, for convenience, they want to keep them there. They want to stay at their campus. They don't want, the convenience of not having to drive them and so forth. So we would open it up to those employees, and they can keep their children at their campus. Of course, it would be a tuition-based program, and those students would be assigned to the regular pre-K classrooms. So they would be absorbed into the classrooms. Again, only if there's availability.
The other element that, I haven't seen any, we talked about it in our workshop, and I've not seen a recommendation how that's gonna be, and it's really, there's 2 ways to manage your growth and move people into schools that are underutilized.
Yes.
One is a rezoning, which we've kind of already, as a board and as an administration, talked about. It's not gonna be a cascade, and it's not gonna be all at once. It's gonna be a shock. So it'll be probably over time. The other is that you identify campuses, which it was my understanding we were gonna do, which had capacity. And we're talking about 3 or 4 classroom capacity. So that when those students moved into those campuses and they stayed there, now you're naturally shifting folks to making that their home school, so to speak. So I like the idea of an IB, dual language, Bettis, but if it's only one classroom, I don't, but having said that, is there any other efforts that could be made with any other campus on the, because I think there's a natural sideways from east to west. Bettis being, I think, the first one from Gonzalez, and then after that's Castañeda, and then after that is Sanchez, and very closely Hendricks on the far. If naturally we can figure a way to move population in there, either,
Rayburn before.
sir?
Is Rayburn before Bettis? It is, right?
Yeah, basically, it's
Right.
the exact same.
They're right there on the same, yeah. But Rayburn needs to be put in the equation.
Yeah.
I think we have to first look at cost, number of individuals that we're bringing in. Again, this is a test, right?
Yes, sir.
But the other is, how do you get those populations where you want them? That's, I think, has to be an element that's in the equation, in making your decision.
And our price point's a little bit higher than they would be paying in the private sector. So that's to the point of being very, very, from a marketing standpoint, making it attractive and giving them a reason to pay a little bit more is something that we have to find the right location. And we'll get the price.
Yes, we are. And I know that this year there was a huge demand and request for parents wanting to go to Sanchez because it was dual language and so forth. And so that seems to be now the up and coming school. You know, I mean, all our schools are great, of course, but Bettis also, but they don't have the room. And I did speak to Mr. Islas. I said, you know, can you find more classrooms? He said, I can't. He said, I'm at capacity. I only have one classroom, and I anticipate adding another classroom. Last year I said, okay. Rayburn is not a dual language school. We most certainly can consider it. However, there is a STEAM campus. So we would like to offer one STEAM campus and one dual language. And so the other option would be Fields, but Fields is it's centrally located. And again, most of the students that feed into Fields qualify. So we wouldn't be attracting too many parents that would be paying tuition there.
Now, the schools north of Lolana is
Right.
where this program's gonna have
Exactly.
the best impact.
The proposed tuition, we did get feedback again from employees and parents that it was a little bit high, so we went ahead and recalculated, and so now our new proposed tuition is $580 per month or $5,220 per year. So we think that this is more comparable to, it's still a little bit higher than the daycares, but it's definitely more competitive, will keep us more competitive. Again, in private schools, in speaking to different employees, they're paying anywhere between $500 to $600, so it varies.
When does the day end for pre-K?
With us at 3:30.
Do we have allocations for them to stay later?
Most schools, if not all, have after-school programs.
So then there'll be, if I roll my child at Castaneda,
Yes.
once 3:30 comes, if I want them to stay, then I pay the
Yes.
other fee.
Mhm, They have the same.
Safe and secure.
Safe.
But they do that now in daycare. If you don't pick them up by 4, they have an extended fee.
Oh, they do?
Well, wherever.
Well, private schools, it's an extra fee
Extra charge?
if you wanna keep
Okay.
them.
Mine's a flat fee, 6 to 6. I think because I have multiple kids, they give me a special deal.
So once again, we went ahead and put together the costs that didn't change. Again, this is at the high end. The teacher and an aide is an approximate $86,000 investment. Instructional costs, we went ahead and did an inventory we currently have in place to see if we could bring the cost down, and we did. We do have existing classroom furniture that we can use to equip these 5 classrooms, and we also have some curriculum that we have in existence, because again, as we have closed classrooms, this has been left there. So this reduces the cost from originally was at $35,000 to $16,140.17. So that's significant savings. So the total investment per classroom, again, year 1 and year 2, I just broke it down here for you. The first year would be $123,194, and this includes the meals. The meals, as I mentioned last time, we don't get reimbursement for meals because these students, of course, do not qualify. They're not economically disadvantaged. The second year, it would be reduced to $107,000 approximately, because again, we are no longer investing in the furniture, equipment, and instructional resources. And so again, with adding these 5 classrooms, the projected investment, the district expense would be approximately 41,770. And of course, we would need to budget for that this year. This would be upfront cost. And so this is why I'm bringing it forward, because that would be part of the budget for next year. Moving forward into year 2, then we would start to see some gains, some revenue of approximately 7,786. So we would start to almost recover our investment from year 1 in year 2.
Now,
A difference of about 3,000.
These figures don't assume that if an Edinburgh parent is bringing their kids to pre-K here, and they like the school so much that they leave them here for kinder and first and second, those numbers aren't included in here.
No, because once they move on to kinder and first, then we start generating ADA.
Right, so, in other words, our goal is that they stay here.
Right.
And then the revenue just keeps coming.
Exactly.
Got it.
And they stay here at that campus.
No doubt.
Yeah. And that needs to be continued to emphasize. Yeah.
Well, as long as they stay here and they don't go to an overcrowded campus. But if we keep them at MISD, we're good. Right, I mean.
With the exception of the programs that we offer, like the International Baccalaureate, which is on certain campuses.
Right. But if for some reason they wanna move their 3rd grade kid from Sanchez to Hendricks, then it's okay, cause they're still staying within the district.
Yeah, we make, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And we would reevaluate the budget each year to see if there's opportunity to continue lowering the tuition rate. Of course, like we said, it's not about making money, it's about breaking even and attracting more families to the district.
One more question, full of questions, so. The employee, is the employee paying for the tuition?
Yes.
Is there a way to take it out before taxes? Like they could sign up on their checks, so we take it out before taxes? No?
I would.
Yeah, IRS.
No.
got it.
They get a tax credit anyway.
Yeah.
Why do you think Doc's gonna buy a Mercedes?
Have an old Dodge.
But you get a tax credit, all that's, deductible.
Now, there is a way through what you're talking about. It's dependent care. And you're allowed up to $2,600 under the IRS guidelines. And it's employee deducted pre-tax. And so then it goes into a fund, a pool. And as the employee is incurring that cost on a monthly, it then pays for it directly. Or it could be reimbursed back to you, provided you show proof that you paid it for childcare. And it is pre-tax dollars, that's true. So that $2,600 is reduced by your overall tax burden. Something to look at, and it's a great, if we're allowed in the school district to do that, I can tell you in the private sector, it's a great benefit package to say you get the medical expense reimbursement and the dependent care, child care, or dependent care, I should say, because it's gonna be a senior adult too.
We do have that,
We
we
can
do
only
offer
do it
that.
for our employees, but we can't do it for
It's
everybody.
really employees.
No, just employees,
Employees.
exactly, it must be
We
employees.
do offer dependent care, deduction, and that's through Mr. Silva's office, and also for medical expense reimbursement.
So we're already
pre-tax
doing it.
dollars. We're already doing it, and our employees, I mean, as a matter of fact, like, I did it when I had childcare, got a tax break on those expenditures, and I also do it for my, medical expenses. So it reduces your tax liability at the end of the year, it does help.
So we're already doing what Mrs. Ali said, that was.
Yes.
Trustee Ali said was
We
fine,
are.
yeah, so it's good.
From that angle, yes, we are participating. And we could certainly do more on the education side to employees
That's why I said, wait a
to
minute.
make sure, especially those that sign up, that this is available.
Good.
Just a comment, I was worried about the price, but couple parents' feedback was that we're in the ballpark. The selling point though was the fact that they can bring their child to our school, start the adjustments, and have a structure. And having that certified teacher was the biggest sell. So I think you're right on, you know, the price, I'm paying on the other end, college, right, so I don't remember those days, but I'm sure it's still
We
expensive.
wish you were back to those days.
Yes, I did.
Gets worse.
And
Oh, yeah.
I spoke to a couple of colleagues about what they were paying, and somewhere at the $600 per month for 10 months. This is only 9 months. And they have to have a meal ticket. You know, they have to pay a meal plan on top of that, the 600. So,
Wow.
they were in the 500 to 600 and up.
Yeah, that's-
But that's just tuition, and it's usually on a 10-month. Ours is only on a 9-month. And then it didn't include meals, so that was extra. They would have to probably pay, they were paying for a meal plan.
The other thing that it doesn't include, that I'm sure your colleagues will tell you, is the price of their uniforms. They're not $6 shirts, they charge you like $25. And then they require you to sell a certain amount of high-priced
Fundraising.
tickets. Yeah, so.
And there's also registration
that buy
fees
themselves.
that they have to pay, and some range from a couple $100s to up to $1,000 for these private schools.
Yeah.
And then we don't have any of that.
We had a discussion last week, and it's on your next slide, but the article ran, there was a lot of comments in there about neighboring school districts doing everybody for free, and so I asked Lorena, tell me how they're doing it, and she gave me the answer, which is on the next slide.
Yes.
Which
And-
is this one up here.
Yes, and so what we did is we went ahead and took a look at the neighboring districts. And some of them, there's 3 districts that do have universal pre-K, which means that it's free for everybody. However, if you notice, the percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged at the other districts is significantly higher than McAllen. Really, the only district that's below us is Sheridan. As you can see there on the slide, 60% of their population is economically disadvantaged. McAllen's at 71%. So there's still, almost 30% of our students that are not economically disadvantaged, and that's the population that we're targeting, because they're paying daycare already, or they're paying private school, or they're homeschooled. So this would be a viable option for them. Westlaco, Mission, and PSJA do offer universal pre-K. And again, PSJA, they're at 91% economically disadvantaged. Mission 83% and Westlaco 82%. And so we wonder, is it cost effective for them? And so we looked at the retention rate of these pre-Kers that are enrolling and if they're keeping them. And looking at Mission, for example, they started universal pre-K in 2015, 2016. You can see that they were losing enrollment, and then it spiked to 994 in pre-K. And what they did is they used a pre-K grant. They got that pre-K grant to pay for salaries and so forth. So that's how they were able to offset their costs, and then they kept it. And so, but they were still already bringing in a good number of kinder students the subsequent year. And so the students are staying, and they're actually growing based on this information that we were able to gather. PSJA, on the other hand, seems to be, they have universal pre-K. It's for everybody. And they seem to be losing enrollment from year to year. However, part of that number in pre-K is 3-year-olds, because they have all that they have about 1,000 students in Head Start. So when they look to kinder, you're only looking at the 5-year-olds, they're not the 3. So that might be a reason. I wasn't able to verify that information. I did speak to the director from the early Head Start, but not to the assistant soup who oversees the PEMS and all of these figures, so I wasn't able to verify that information. But she did point out, remember, 3 and 4-year-olds are part of pre-K. Other districts only have 4-year-olds because they're not partnered with Head Start. So that might be a factor there, or maybe not. That's why they're losing. It seems like they're losing their kids.
Our pre-K would be 3 and 4 also, or just 4?
Now it is 3 and 4-year-olds because now we have Head Start. So it's the 3-year-olds that are at Head Start. Yes.
Got you, but we're talking about the business side of trying to recruit students and retain them. But also, I was trying to find an article that I saw online that talked about the studies out there that when the kids can start earlier,
Yes.
and their results long-term are significantly higher than those that are not in a pre-K.
Absolutely.
Was that study or that article in line with?
Absolutely. Well, that's one of the reasons why the state is pushing for pre-K and giving us more funding, because we know that especially for students that are economically disadvantaged, English national learner, it makes a huge difference, a huge impact on their academics. So definitely, and that applies to all kids.
I
really.
think the article also stated even for kids that come from families that might have a little more financial means,
Yes.
but they still have issues with maybe the kids not speaking
Yes.
at the level they should be, or socializing
Yes.
at the level it should be. So the sooner you get them into school, 1, we can identify if there's any services that we can provide, and then 2, they start acclimating better to the
Yes.
school. So
It's good for all kids, absolutely.
right. So I know we focus on trying to recruit more, but it's also, that's just one of the reasons for doing this. The main reason, I think,
Yes.
is to get as many kids into our system,
Mhm.
start preparing them, right?
Yes,
It
absolutely.
should have an impact on your dropout rate,
Absolutely.
et cetera.
Yes. The earlier we get them in, obviously the better off. The sooner you're starting with those academic skills. And as we know, foundation is key. And we wanna, by third grade, we wanna make sure that our kids are reading on grade level, because they'll be fine, they'll be set for the rest of their lives academically. And that's proven by research. And then again, Westaco, very similar, they do have universal pre-K, and again, it seems like they're keeping their students once they enroll them. So, based on that analysis, we like to move forward with this recommendation.
How soon can we start advertising and all that? Are y'all ready to roll that out?
As soon as you tell us, we can go ahead and start moving on this.
Can I suggest you have a system for how you're gonna take people, like, if you get, you know, if it's full, then what do you do, waiting list, like, what's the
Yes.
fair process, you're gonna do by lottery, you're gonna
Yes.
do, I would have that in place before, because you might have a massive amount of people, and then how do you keep it fair?
Absolutely.
One of the questions I brought up to Melinda today was collecting tuition. Because I know, you wait till the last day, and if they don't pay, what do you do? You say, hey, we're not giving it back, or we can't come back, or?
Keep the kids.
Yes.
They're like, keep them.
They might not
Work
pay.
for some.
So
Right.
make sure you have that all figured out too, as far as.
Credit card on file.
And we looked at other districts, Austin ISD has some very extensive procedures that, and Dallas ISD that we can glean from in setting up ours.
Nate, do you know this?
Yeah, and one other point I wanted to make is, some of the comments were that, just trying to make money. By law, you can't charge more other than to cover costs. So we're not making any money off of this. We're just trying to cover costs. So it's not a moneymaker. We're not have a profit on this. It's just to cover costs for salaries, for staff, for meals, and all those things, right? So make sure that the community understands, we're not trying to make money. We can't do it for free. We're just covering
We're actually losing money.
the first year.
Yes.
And that's what I told people.
To write their state representatives, make it universal, and we wouldn't be doing this at all.
Full day.
Yeah, full day.
Full day, university. And now if there's no more questions, we will turn it over to Mr. Miller for his HR section.
Good afternoon. Today's presentation involves two parts. And put the next one there you go. Thank you. Goal 2 is people development, also strategy to attract and retain high quality staff. I'm going to fly through this, but I know we've got limited time to a degree. District could not achieve our vision and mission without being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, so that's why I really like this budget process, because we just peel that onion back and get down to the various layers. Today we're going to cover, you can put the next slide, the agenda. Oops, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry. So today's agenda, we'll cover the strategic plan, we've covered that compensation plan strategy, statewide starting teacher salary, statewide average teacher salary, peer district market, peer district comparison, 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years, teacher market comparison for the median, 3-year teacher market comparison, student to staff FTA ratio, total years of experience for our teachers and librarians, total experience of newly hired teachers and librarians, staffing program, grant funded positions, substitute teacher program, some key dates, and some job fair data. So compensation plan strategy, starting pay matters, but it's not everything. So our data shows that we do not have trouble recruiting and retaining teachers. So Mr. Crown's developed this new hire survey to see why they chose McAllen over the other local districts. Top 2 responses have been so far location and recommended by current employees. Money was mentioned on down the road, but those were the top 2 locations. Teacher turnover rates continued to decrease. In 15-16, we was at 12.25. 16-17, we dropped to 10.35. This year is still to be determined once the school year is over, but last year this time we lost 87 employees. Now we're up to date. You'll hear later at the board meeting we're down to 52.
You didn't give us any of that information, right?
No.
Okay. I just want to
I'll
make
get
sure.
you that.
No, I was looking.
We were looking for it.
Okay.
Sorry. So next one is know your market. So we benchmark local districts. You'll see that in just a little bit. Keep career path connected. So I know we started that last year to give people a career path, something to shoot for. This year we're taking it to the next level in the succession plan program. So we identified 34 key positions as directors and up. Out of those 34 key positions, we've identified 54 employees that have the potential to replace those in the succession plan. So we're developing those folks, looking for skill gaps, providing training opportunities for those folks. A multi-year approach. In 16-17, 0 year starter teacher at 45,800, We did decompression adjustments in year 9 through 11 and 15 through 21, so it's targeted adjustments. And that was, equity adjustment for non-teachers was to meet 90% of the market. For 17-18, zero-year teacher jumped to 46,850. Decompression adjustments in years 18 through 22, excuse me. 18-19, this is just being considered, nothing firm yet. Equity adjustments to address decompression and reward loyalty and dedication, of course. Equity adjustments for the non-teachers to address decompression and meet 90% of the market. But I think the best thing for the non-teachers is what the proposal that will probably end up coming to the table is going to get everybody to at least $10 an hour. So right now, I know that was a comment I think last year or year before. So right now the lowest paid is $9.55 an hour. To differentiate pay increases, as I just mentioned, targeted teacher equity adjustments for decompression. We want to make sure our teacher salary schedules are competitive for recruiting and retention purposes, and stipends, of course, to focus on recruiting and retention efforts. So the next budget workshop will have more information on stipends. Next slide, thank you. So this is the 2017-18 statewide starting teacher salary by region. So you'll see McAllen starting teacher salary is 46,850. Region 1 shows at 46,375. So with the exception of Houston and El Paso, we're the next highest starting teacher salary. So I went to cost of living. What does it cost of living here compared to these other areas? So it costs 9% higher in Houston than it does McAllen, 8% more in Dallas, 12% higher in Austin, 6% higher in San Antonio. El Paso is 4%, and I think that Amarillo is 2% higher. So the valley is considerably cheaper than these other locations.
U.S. News and World Report last week had a survey. 3 of the top 10 most inexpensive places to live. Harlingen was number 10. Brownsville was number 10. Harlingen was number 3, and McAllen was number 1, if I remember correctly. So that may be something to include.
U.S. News and World Report, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That teacher salary from McAllen, compared to that chart, those are median scores on that chart. So when you say we're set, except for 2 areas that are above us, that's not necessarily true. Those are medium scores, right? So there's other districts that are gonna be higher than us, right? In there?
That shows the region, so the whole entire region 1, and then later on, we compare our district to closer peers in the region, we break it down.
But I'm saying those are median, for Dallas, 45,000, that's the median score for that region, right?
Yes, for that entire
So
regional service.
there's scores, there's salaries that are higher, there's salaries that are lower.
Yes, sir.
Maybe
Kenny
higher.
for sure is gonna be much higher than
Are
that.
those starting salaries?
No.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. This
Yes.
slide,
Yes, they
yes.
are.
big
Yeah,
part.
this
Yes.
is-
Starting,
That's fine.
Yes,
starting
this is starting,
salary,
excuse me.
but the median for that regional center.
Then all 20 up there, you're getting this sum.
Next slide will show average. Next slide shows average teacher salary. So again, McAllen ISD is 52,272. You see Region 1, 51,076, and we're still behind just Houston and El Paso.
Oh, you're higher in El Paso.
McAllen is, I'm sorry, Region 1, excuse me.
I'm sorry, my bad.
Next one is just the peer district. I'm gonna show you what's local districts we consider for our peer district, so you see that later. Hidalgo didn't submit any pay data, so later on I will talk about just 11 districts, that their data, if it's in there, is from 16, 17, so I tried to exclude that.
You know what would be good is to compare to, just for exercise, is the 40 schools we are ranked with, to see how much resources and effort we're putting in and what are our results. And what the salary could be one of the aspects of that. So it kind of give you a really good insight that for.
Apples to apples.
Exactly, because that's what we're comparing when it comes to our test scores.
Test scores, yes, but as you see the regional data that they're scattered across the state, you have different economic factors, so but we can definitely, that might skew it a bit, but we can definitely compare that.
Are any of
That would
those-
be a good analysis.
Are
Yeah, I
any-
mean, because that gives you a basis of,
It's another perspective.
exactly,
Mhm.
it's not the answer and it's not the
Yes.
silver bullet, but it gives you another perspective.
We certainly can do that.
Are any of those 40 that we're compared with in our region? No, I don't think so, are they?
No, there's 2 that are.
Are they?
Bridget.
Bridget just walked out. I think-
Edinburgh's one.
Yeah, Edinburgh's
I think there's
one.
one, okay, so that's good.
But that's a good question, but I think there are only two that, I think La Jolla.
PSJ, I think there's more.
Find out.
Okay.
I'm not asking this so you can go look for it, I'm just asking just as a general question. Our benefit package, how would you rate us compared to others? 'Cause it piqued me because you were talking about, Lorena, for our teachers that bring our kids that we allow, for some type of credits. And I think overall, we have a good overall package, right? We have a good insurance, vision, dental and all that, so I'm just curious, if you get a sense, are we competitive as an overall?
I think we have a very competitive benefit package, but it's really hard, it gets really muddy real quickly, because once you get past the premiums, then it gets into the co-pays and the
Absolutely, you can
deductibles.
choose and all that, yeah.
And some plans have different options.
And then don't go looking for that, it's gonna be very hard to quantify that, so don't worry about that.
Especially on the family plan, we're extremely competitive.
Yes, we are.
We're $200 a month below the average, so it's very
Why we're-
competitive.
And I guess I guess my statement's more of just a recognition of that we do have a.
It's part of that compensation plan, so it does benefit the employee.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the pure district comparison in 0 year. You'll see McAllen is 7th place. And our teachers start out at $46,850. It would be low, La Jolla, Wesco, Mission, Harlingen, PSJ, and Edinburgh. I think interesting on this to note is IDEA, they've already put out their salaries for next year for 18-19 school year, and they're at $46,500, so we already be IDEA starting to pay for next year's teachers by $350 before we get into the meat and potatoes of our budget cycle. So, that's exciting. And you'll see another chart later on that talks about these different year increments, but 5-year we was at 7th place, 10-year we was at 6th place. 15-year we was at 6th place, and 20-year. I'm sorry, I don't have it yet.
No,
But he mentioned
you did.
I just want to kind of point out that our 0-year teachers are more money here at 0 year than I did.
Well, I can guarantee you that our retention rate's a lot higher than theirs. I know that for a fact.
So that, and then the 20-year is 8th place. This is the chart that I like. District teacher salaries are competitive compared to the market median until the 20-year range. If you remember a couple years back, that gap at the very end was a lot wider than that. You see, in 16-17 it was 96%, and the year before that it was 95%. Now we're at 98%, so we're closing that gap.
But we still have a cap, right, at 20 years?
Yes. For new hire teachers, right?
Well, what about for existing?
Existing, they would get the raise and any equity adjustments beyond the 20 years.
So if I've
The
been
cap
here,
is only for new people coming in, so if I come from Edinburgh and I have 25 years experience, my starting salary would be at the 20-year mark, that's how I understand it.
That's my-
But if I'm an existing employee and I have
is that done
25
for
years,
financial reasons or?
That's just our teacher scale, caps at 20.
it's a TASB recommendation.
Just one point of clarification, is on the campus group 40, it's the campuses that are compared against 39 other schools, and the districts compared
Right, not
against
the
the districts
district.
across
The
the state.
district just wins, it's one distinction based on the performance of the scores.
So campuses are grouped against 39 others.
So that's like 12%.
That's what we got for me.
Okay, thank you.
So in this chart, it shows a 3-year teacher market comparison. So in this chart, you need to read it like the high means that you're more competitive with the local districts in your teacher pay. I'd like you to look at the far right-hand side. So it would be green in 15-16, we was number 12, dead last out of the peer districts. And in 2 short years, the district went from 12th to 9th place. And you'll see where the blue line, which is 17-18, is up towards the top, of course. So we're becoming more competitive as time goes on, and we're closing that gap, climbing from 12th to 9th place. In 10-year range, we went from 8th to 6th place in just 1 year. 15 years range, we went from 7th to 6th, and we're maintaining that. In the 0 to 5, we went from 8th to 7th, so we're climbing to be more competitive. Any questions so far? So this chart shows the 2017-18 student to staff FTE ratio. If you'll note on the far left-hand column, student to staff ratio is 7.01. So the benchmark is the TEA, it's 7 students for every total staff, so we're right at 7.01, so as long as we don't go below 7, we're good. The chart's a little bit deceiving in that the scale across the bottom, 2000, 2009, 2010, it jumps every odd number of years, so 10, 11 is missing, so you have to just assume that that's there. In the far right-hand column, non-teachers, we did decrease from 15, 16, 16, 17 by 46. And this past year, we creeped up 14. We hired some clerical and I think a PD or 2 in there. But we're still considerably below where we was in 15, 16. Any questions on this?
Just want to, trustee understand that trustee Suarez will be representing us at the City of McAllen meeting. We're getting an award, so they're heading that way. Thanks, guys.
The check's under my name, but I'll let you know.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah. He was just kidding, there.
For the record.
For the record, he's kidding, there, no check.
What you said?
Mr. Committee, what award are we winning?
The cleanup.
Oh, that's right.
Beautification.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, this chart shows the total years of experience for the teachers and librarians. So the median is at the 11-year mark. 472 teachers are in the 0 to 5, 327 in 6 to 10, 356 for 11 to 15, and 250 teachers in 16 to 20. 21 to 25 shows 147, 26 to 30 is 94, and 31 to 35, there's 37 teachers in that bucket. 36 to 40 is 14, and 41 plus is 16. Next chart shows the total experience of newly hired teachers and librarians, so 130 new hires this school year. 54 were 0-year experience, which is 42% of that pie. 1 to 5 is 39 people, 30%. 6 to 10 is 24. 11 to 15 is 9, and 16 plus years was 4.
And when you're making that second number, that's the number of people, right? 4 people?
Yes, sir. Right.
Thank you.
And then the staffing program, staffing strategy. Leadership team continues to review and validate staffing situations daily for instructional and operational efficiencies, save district resources. We want to run lean and efficient, provide the best educational opportunities for our kids. HR directors are focused on vacancies, postings, transfers, reassignments, and repurposing jobs, validating staffing levels. For job vacancy, we're holding the posting still for 45 days unless it's directing the student directly. Seeking efficiencies for processes and procedures, deleting the vacancies after 6 months with no action. And this year we added the assistant superintendent for business operations pushing forward with a final approval before we post. So it's a good checks and balances. I'm just kidding. It's a good checks and balances in the system, so that way.
She says no.
She said no, yes. So, and then we continue with some sample staffing strategies. We closed out 3 elementary school teaching positions due to low enrollment. Closed 2 middle school testing coordinator positions, low enrollment. And same thing, middle school teaching positions, so low enrollment. Human resource directors also meet and have met back with the principals and department directors back in the fall, and they're meeting with them again for staffing efficiencies for next year. If there are any disciplinary issues, I'll be doing the documentation. I'll be giving them all every opportunity to be successful. You have anybody that needs EAP counseling and things like that.
Todd, what school are the middle schools?
Middle schools, the testing coordinators was from Travis to McAllen,
Okay,
and from
go ahead.
from Lincoln to Brown.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then the teaching positions, one Brown ELA resigned and one went from Lincoln to McAllen.
Okay. Thank you.
I really think that we're getting a return on the investment from our directors out there interacting very closely with the campus principals and department directors on how things go on. You know, staffing for next year. What do you need? Does it meet the guidelines? Do you need to adjust the guidelines? Things like that. So they're very heavy involvement with those ladies. So. A review of grant funded positions. So they reviewed over 1,300 grant funded positions. You want to make sure that verified end dates of grants and the funding codes. I think a couple years ago we had a couple positions that the grant had ended. What do we do with those folks? So we're monitoring that very closely, make sure we don't have to, what do we do with those folks when they end? Validate all the positions, make sure to be in charge of the proper fund code, and also realign them to other fund codes if necessary. Substitute teacher, I just put this in there for more for FYI. 589 substitutes enrolled, 500 active subs, work at least 1 day a year, and we have 98% average daily fill rate. I put Region 1 up there because last year was down in the low to mid 80s, so they brought those up to 95%. If you remember about 2 years ago, we looked at SubHub and do we want to outsource to SubHub so we can be more efficient? But SubHub, and that's what I'm talking about, Region 1, 95%. But we're still more efficient than SubHub and we saved ourselves a lot of money by not going down that road. So. Now we do an annual cleanup on those subs that are not active, so we run a report at the end of the school year if you haven't subbed, we clean them up. And then the next one's key dates. They're just more for your information. March 18th through April 12th, the teacher transfer window. It's open through Talent. All those emails have been out there. April 2nd, deadline to submit retirement for teachers to receive leave days. So if you're thinking about retiring, that email is out there. We've sent several reminders. Teacher observation, April 9th, contracts will come to the board on April 9th for initial contracts. Contracts are approved on April 10th, that are approved, excuse me, by the board. May 11th, principal deadline for teacher transfers, and May 14th is the final list that we can bring to the board for contracts. These were just some dates, just more for your information. Job fair dates, we went to a couple last fall, but these are the upcoming job fairs, just more, again, more for your information. We do a very good job, I think, at the job fairs. Typically have very long lines, great feedback. I wish the hiring percentage was a little bit higher, but I think because we're out there and getting so many, that we have more to choose from.
And having seen the guys in action at the UTRGB job fair this past year, it's incredible. You've got some schools that'll have a line of 20 and 25 people deep, and our guys are already talking to them because they've signed in advance to the iPad, and it's just very fluid the way it goes. So kudos to you on that because, you know, I don't know about the districts up top that just sit there and then call out a name and Sam Saldivar and this, you know, Sam's on his 3rd district down, you know, instead of waiting there. So kudos to you guys for having that the way you set it up and checking with the iPad and continue to go forward. Thank you, sir.
No.
Sure.
Where are we on the final decompression?
In the final decompression, I see, this is me, I see it as an ongoing decompression. We're constantly analyzing and working with TASB on that because it depends on what the numbers come in at. We don't have this year's finalized yet as far as where they're gonna be, but we certainly have.
20 plus years or overall?
No, yeah, because I understood that we stopped at, what is it, 2025, and so we still had a few that we still needed to address. Is that still accurate, that we still have a few we still
Yes,
haven't addressed?
that's what I'm sorry. That's what I'm saying. TASB comes in with their, you know, your compressed right here, we can do $200, $300, depends on what year they fall in. And I don't know that you'll see a final, that's just my opinion. I think it's gonna be constant as we go forward. It's a multi-year approach, so.
I like that. I like the fact that it's a continuous
You know,
renewal.
I-
But as far as the initial grouping of our current staff that we had to
Right.
address going through, this should be the end of that, and then we'll go through a continuous, right?
If it's not the last, it'd be the next to last, I would think, just from the initial bulge, if I can bubble's better.
That's probably a good term.
Yeah, but we've made some great progress, like I said, I showed you where we're closing that gap, we're being more competitive.
Okay. And the next question is the staffing model
Okay.
that we had from TASB.
Okay,
How close are we to getting that staffing model? Not necessarily by campus, but as a district, because it seemed there for a while we were seeing a reduction in student membership, that it looked like our staffing was still either plateaued or not much change. So have we seen?
That's this chart that he shared, all staff, as you can see, in 16-17, we reduced 60.
How much?
We went down, trying to see.
bear with me.
I know we had quite a bit of information on the APs when that adjustment was made.
Yes, we went from,
And I wonder where we are with the other subgroups of staff. What reductions were made there?
I know there was 20 recommendations from TASB, And of the 20, I'm missing 2 here. We've completed 6 of them, 7 are still ongoing review. 5 of them, the district administration decided not to implement, for example, the alternative library model. One was the nursing, switching to LPNs, versus RNs. I'm trying to see the other 2 here.
Instructional aides, we're still working on that one.
Let's say ongoing review, and I can go down to them one by one if you want, so. Or I can show
Just
this
in
chart.
general, there was 1 year they shared with us, and Mr. Villa and I were there, where you actually saw a chart, and it gave you an overview of job roles. And it told you what a typical campus would look like, and, you know, principal, AP, et cetera, how many, what was the student population, how many teachers you had, et cetera, et cetera. It gave you a really good snapshot of what your staff for that campus looked like. And TASB did that, this would have been around 2010,
We can
2011.
create that.
If it still exists, that was a really nice overview, so you knew where everybody.
Okay.
This is helpful, but, and I'm not saying we have to get to that level for purposes of this discussion, but it did tell you what your staff actually looked like by campus.
And that's one of the things we've talked about, to set a threshold where, what does it take to have 2 assistant principals? What's the number? And then staying true to that, because right now you can have a middle school with 1,000 kids with 2 assistants, and a middle school with 550 kids with 2 assistants, so.
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. I mean, you know, and that gave you a real good overview, because when you saw the population, you saw that in a glance, you said, wait a minute, if you go by that model, how come there's 3 assistants when you really ought to be 2? And maybe there's a reason, I don't know.
We'll put that together.
And the last is job descriptions. How far down are you in cleaning up and getting job descriptions up to date for all employees?
We've made significant progress on that, and it's really because of the succession planning, because we had to look at all director job descriptions and also the people that would potentially replace them. And we've been doing job description reviews throughout the years, and we were working with different directors, or campuses, not campuses, but the director, excuse me.
We can give you guys hard numbers with regard to, these are the amount that have been fixed, and these are the amount that.
In what areas, especially in what
We can break that down by department.
You have any input on that, Danica, may I ask? I know you've been working on job descriptions,
I can give you numbers.
we'll get the numbers, yeah.
We'll break it down.
And more importantly, what's the time frame? What are the resources you need to get it finished?
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Have any questions?
Nope.
So that concludes our presentation.
Right on the money.
Now let's go open up the other meeting.
Yes.
You want to close the meeting?
Yes.
I move that we close the meeting.
Can I get a second?
Yes, sir.
I have a motion by trustee Saldivar, a second by trustee Alvarado. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The ayes carried 5-0.
Seven,